right, good afternoon. We are glad you are here for Tools for Student Engagement. You can get a copy of this presentation at the bit.ly that is listed at the bottom of the slide, and it is case sensitive. First, we want to go over our norms and our learning outcomes. Of course, we want everybody to be present, flexible, and give grace. We want you to understand how to design engaging activities for in-person and virtual needs simultaneously. We want to add tools to your virtual teacher toolbox. Consider all the planning aspects of virtual grouping and collaborative activities, and how to evaluate your lessons to determine which pieces are best delivered live and which pieces could be independent. And we want you to remember, you are familiar with TRS as a teacher. You are the expert in your curriculum area, and you know where all those resources are. If you don't, please reach out to your IC or any of the curriculum representatives. They are continually updating unit planning to help you understand what is coming. All right.
Hey guys, how are y'all? Good to see everybody. Oh, don't want to restart this. Okay, so we know that what's on everybody's mind is the co-seating arrangement that is going to happen on most secondary campuses. And so we just kind of wanted to dive into that and let you guys know that that's what we've really been looking at when we look at best practices for both virtual and face-to-face learning. So in line with our norms, I'm just going to ask for everybody to be flexible and open-minded as we go through what this is going to look like, because it's never been done before. So we're in different times. So we have to adopt that as our attitude and just how we're going to view things moving forward. So cracking the code on co-seating. These are just a couple of things that we're going to touch on today that are really going to make the co-seating arrangement the best possible arrangement that it can be for what it is. So the first thing that we want to focus on today is increasing engagement through student-centered activities. And we're going to go through 3 strategies today on how to do that. We also want teachers to think about how you all are going to establish procedures and expectations for those unique co-seating arrangements. For example, you're going to have kids in your classroom and you're going to have kids on Zoom. What is that going to look like? Are all your students going to be on Zoom? Are they going to remain on Zoom during their independent work time? And if they are, what is the procedure for that? Are cameras and mics going to be turned off and computer screens, tilted down to 45 degrees like you would in a regular classroom? Are you going to allow kids to get off and on Zoom during their independent work time? If students are staying on, or if they are returning, what is the procedure for that? What is the time limit? Are you setting a timer or a bell if students are remaining on and just turning off their cameras and their mics? So just thinking through some of those procedures and expectations for students that traditionally are not things that you would have to think about. The next thing that's going to be really critical for a co-seating arrangement is that we want teachers to feel empowered to act as a facilitator for the majority of their instructional time. So really having the students do the work in the learning and having teachers facilitate that work. And we're going to go through today with our strategies what that looks like for you as a classroom educator. And then finally, we want teachers to be able to communicate an avenue for students to reach out to receive instructional support. So what is the procedure for kids requesting help? Again, you're going to have kids in your class and you're going to have kids online. And so what is the expectation for what they do to reach out to you? Where are your static help materials located? Do you create a topic, called Help Center in Google Classroom that has your, recurring tutoring times, Chromebook troubleshooting, things that are going to be recurring issues for kids? Also establishing an avenue for kids to ask questions during instructional time. Is there a back channel? Is it a chat? What is that going to look like? And then finally, where can kids get help outside of office hours or instructional time? Do you have a frequently asked questions page that's updated daily? Things like that. So those are some things that we want teachers to begin to think about during this co-seating arrangement. And today we're going to kind of walk you through some strategies and tools to help with that. Let's do an activity, shall we, friends? Okay. So what we would like for you all to think about right now is the 2 different types of instruction that occur in a class period or educational block. We've got that teacher-driven or teacher-led instruction, and then we have student activities, things that are done independently or as a group. They can either be digital or offline. So right now, in your heart, I would like for you to examine what, on the bottom, we've given you some things that can happen in an instructional period. And what category do you think that these fit into? So if you'll just take a moment in your group or in your own mind to think about where should some of these things go. Okay. All right, so hopefully you have started to kind of reflect on things that would happen in your normal class period and what some of these categories would look like. And so you can share out in your groups if you like, and we're going to show you what we think. Okay, so there are multiple correct answers. There's not a completely, black and white, this is right, this is wrong, but some of the things, here's an example of what some of these what some of these activities could look like. So we've got on the left-hand side our live with a teacher, and that could be a test or quiz, a lecture, class discussion, and then on our right-hand side, we have the activities that are that lend themselves more to student-based activities, student-centered instruction, and independent work and learning time. What are some things that you notice about the two different groups here? Just think about it in your mind. And from this slide, we can gather that the bulk of your instruction time should be student-centered. The bulk of the instruction should be independent or group activities, and again, in which the teacher is acting as a facilitator. So what could that possibly look like? I'm so glad you asked. Okay, so here we have some actual activities that in a co-seating arrangement that could be used for each of these times. So for example, if you're gonna do whole group lecture live with a teacher, teachers can deliver direct instruction to all students on Zoom and share their screen, exactly like I'm doing right now. That would be an example of something that would be teacher-led live instruction that would work in a co-seating arrangement. An example of a student activity that would include whole group lectures. So again, this is a student-centered activity that could be used, would be in lieu of a direct teach in Zoom. You could use a pre-recorded lesson. And I think the key component here is to record it as if you were teaching live. So we're not talking about a YouTube video that you found. We're talking about you recording your instruction as if the audience was present with you, asking the same kind of probing questions, giving the same processing and wait time that you would do if you were live instructing. And then giving the students the ability to watch that live instruction or that pre-recorded instruction independently, and they can pause, rewind, go back as needed, take notes, etc. So those are just some examples of how we have broken down the things that happen in your classroom and given you concrete examples of what that might look like in the 2020 COVID time.
Okay, so how can you plan for both teacher-led instruction and student activities within your block? So as Camille showed us, she gave us some examples of what that looks like being teacher-led and then those student activities. And we've given you 3 block examples here. So what does that actually look like within your block? I'll let you look at this and kind of think about it. Okay, so we broke this down. So we took our teacher-led instruction and we put that in blue, and then we highlighted our student activities in red. So you can see that our teacher-led instruction time is the hook or the intro, and then we have a lot of student activities and activity time. And like in the middle block, the modified classic block, you see we start with the students, and then they come back for teacher, and then it goes back to the students. There's a little bit of both there. So these are just some ways that you can take your block and make those activities work for both of them. So with your group or your PLC, how have you broken up your block? I want you to discuss that with your group. And how does chunking your block support a successful co-seating model? So I'll give you some time to think about that. How long do I wait? Okay. Okay, so we're going to look next at if you're chunking your block, how do you do that? And what kind of strategies can we use to support that? We're going to look at virtual stations, playlists, and Nearpods to support that model.
Okay, so let's dive right in with virtual stations. What are virtual stations? Students rotate on a fixed schedule or at the teacher's discretion, depending on how you want to set that up. It can be different from day to day. There are different digital, both online and could be offline stations. You can do a lot of different activities with virtual stations. You can do full class instruction, small group instruction, group projects, creation assignments, and independent activities. And in thinking about virtual stations, you might wonder, why would I do this? What are the benefits of it? So using data to strategically group your students to provide them more guidance, more direct instruction at the level they need, more feedback, teaching and reteaching. This is a great option for that. Practicing a skill on their own with peers, also with the teacher, so getting some different types of practice in there. Supporting different learning preferences, and of course, engaging your students. One of the best ways to keep their attention for a 90-minute block is to keep them engaged, and mixing it up a little with different activities, different groups is a great way to do that. Okay, so we have a few different types of stations here, and you don't necessarily, we're gonna look at 3 different types of stations, but you don't necessarily have to only have 3 stations. For instance, this individual one, you could have 2 different individual stations with different assignments at each. Okay, so students can, at an individual station, view a pre-recorded lesson, reflect and respond to a prompt or something else, work on a digital artifact, complete a performance assessment. Remember, you can find those in the IFD. And they can also participate in concept and skill practice. Some things to remember when you're prepping the individual station. When you're recording a lesson, make sure you speak as if live to students, just like we're doing here today. Providing instructions for the activity, including the materials, where the students will submit their learning evidence or their deliverable, and procedures for requesting assistance. If you've done the introduction piece and then the students, this Zoom ended and students went out to their stations and are working on their own, and they run into an issue and need to ask for assistance, how do they do that? You need to go ahead and prep them with that information before that comes up so they know exactly what to do. And then, of course, what kind of deliverable will students submit to show evidence of learning? And it's a good idea to have a deliverable for each station, no matter what type of station it is, just so, you know, the kids are, you're not live on Zoom, so the kids are still working. They're still working towards those TEA required minutes. And if they have a deliverable, then they're good for those minutes. They can keep accruing those with these stations. Another type of station is a collaborative station. So students can work collaboratively using a digital tool. We have lots of those available to us. They can peer edit each other's work, posting thoughts and comments and responding to one another, like on a Flipgrid. Some things to consider for the collaborative station. Pretty similar to the independent station considerations. Decide which platform the students are going to use to collaborate. Don't forget to provide those instructions for the materials, where they're going to submit their deliverable, and procedures for requesting assistance from you, and what kind of deliverable they're going to submit. And then finally, we have the teacher facilitated station. And this one could be, you have some options with this. You could do this whole group at the beginning of the Zoom for that day. So you can check off the station and then they go to work in their independent and collaborative stations, or you can introduce the instructions to the stations in the Zoom all together and then end the Zoom and students go out to work and rotate through those stations at their own time. What we don't recommend is having this teacher facilitated station running in a breakout room at the same time as students are in other breakout rooms doing the other station assignments, because when they're in those breakout rooms, you have to stay in the teacher facilitated one, and you can't jump around to check in on them. And that's quite a bit of time for students left to their own devices to do bad things. So we don't want to do that. So think about that when you're planning a teacher facilitated station. And remember, this is the side of that drag and drop that had fewer things on it, because students can receive direct instruction, they can complete a digital assessment monitored by you, and they can use the Zoom chat or discuss a topic provided by the teacher. Considerations here, we have a little bit more to think about. How can you use data to strategically group your students? Just like when we're face-to-face, you're gonna use data from a pre-assessment or maybe from an exit ticket or some formative assessment to group your students. It's the same virtually. Provide instructions for the activity, including tools or materials needed and procedures for requesting teacher assistance, just like the other stations. Communicate expectations for participation. Do you want cameras on? Do you want them to speak out or put questions in the chat? Things like that. What kind of deliverable will students submit to show evidence of learning? Even though you're with them, they still need some kind of deliverable. It's that whole, if they're working, they're learning idea. And at the end of the teacher facilitated rotation station, how will you evaluate the learning objective? So some things to think about with your stations.
Hello everyone, I'm going to go ahead and go over time management when facilitating stations. So time management is extremely important, and we encourage you to really think about the routines and procedures you're going to ask your teachers to put in place with their students before they even roll out stations, right? We want to make sure that the logistics are as smooth as possible so that students can focus on the learning and we don't experience any technical hiccups. So as Allison was stating, stations can include student activities that are done independently or in groups. And of course, we want teachers to consider having a station that's going to be teacher-led during that live rotation. So while students are completing other stations, they would eventually rotate to a teacher-centered station. So just considering, the time management aspect of that and how much time teachers are going to be providing students to complete that independent or small group work before they actually rotate to that teacher-centered station. And of course, teachers are going to need to be very cognizant of the time they're with their small group in order to ensure that they are seeing all of their students in that learning block. So we want to leave plenty of time for transitions for groups. So again, just like we would in our classrooms, we want to make sure that we give students that, cushion of time for them to smoothly transition. And that way you can go ahead and start that, teacher-led block with all of those students that are in that small group, and you don't have any students trickling in and missing things. So consider how you're going to roll out that transition time. And there's even some really great resources that teachers can use in order to make sure that they are, not losing track of time. So we've actually linked one of those resources within this presentation. It's called Classroom Screen. So everyone here will be receiving a copy of these slides. And throughout it, you'll find lots of little goodies, lots of great resources for you to share with your campuses. So also, just as Allison stated, we want to hold our students accountable. So as your teachers are providing that time for their students to complete their work at their stations, make sure that they're allotting enough time for them to complete those formative assessments, whatever that may look like. That's definitely going to factor into the time management. So now we actually want to show you what some of those station rotations are going to those templates could look like. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out my screen here. And of course, there is no one right way that a template should look. We've provided a lot of different examples. So this is one way. This is a type of template that's very basic but clear, right? So if that's something that you're really wanting to prioritize in terms of just communicating that layout and that schedule to your students and to your teachers, I think this is a really great template to go with. And of course, all of these templates are going to be provided to you so you can really customize them and make them your own. So as you're looking at these different templates, go ahead and ask yourself, or discuss in your groups, what are some common elements that all of these templates have? And even if you decide not to use any of these templates that we're offering you, what elements from these templates should you be integrating into your own planning? Here's definitely a fancier template, and as a former elementary teacher, I really love these eye-catching designs. So of course they don't have to look this way, but I definitely think it adds a level of engagement. So as your students are going through these stations and this material, we want them to have fun with it. We want them to be engaged, just like as was stated previously in this presentation. When students are engaged, they're less likely to be off task, right? So any little thing like an engaging station template can help. And then the last example is this one right here. And I really love what this teacher did, how she really broke down each individual station into small, basically like bullet points. So students really get a good snapshot of what the expectations are at each station that they're going to complete in that learning block. And of course, we love the GIFs. Again, that goes into engagement, right? Any little bit helps. And so now I'm going to go ahead and hand this on over to Jen Wood, who's going to be discussing more expectations and considerations for rotations.
Okay, so looking at, catch up here. Just some reminders of things to remember as you're pulling this all together and trying to think of everything. Number of station and what's happening at each, so that the students understand exactly where they'll be going, and then also the routines and procedures for what they'll be doing at each station. Whether that's posted somewhere or posted in a Google Classroom, or somehow the students need that. They either need to practice it or have it available so that they can check in with that. A list of the groups and the schedule so that if they get a little off track, they know exactly where to plug back in. Learning activities and resources for each station, that those are clear, that those are provided, that there are links right there for them to get to, and they don't have to come and ask where those things are or how to get to them, that it's provided right there for them. Maybe providing an answer to common questions. So providing a sheet of like, if this happens, kind of one pager or click sheet just in case they need that extra help. A formative assessment piece so that you know where they're at, maybe when they start, and also that reflection piece at the end so that you have some type of feedback on the work that they did while they were in the station. And then test it. Before you facilitate, walk through the process of your virtual station with your students. Practice it. This is where I think the digital coaches and the ICs are essential because you can partner with the teachers and help them go through the process of what they've set up and kind of anticipate those things that may come up and troubleshoot those in advance. Providing students with specific steps while they're in the station lesson. If they need help, if they need extra resources, where will those things be located? And ask your students for feedback and reflect on the experience. What went well? What do they need that they didn't have? What did they have that worked really well? Just having that good conversation with students so that you can better this process the more that you do it. And don't hesitate to make changes, and being transparent with your students that this is new for all of this. And just a personal story, my daughter's in high school, and after spring remote learning, I asked her what was a positive, and she said, I love to see my teacher learn. She said, he's telling us each day something new with technology that he's learned, and he's telling us what was frustrating, but what he's able to do with that new information. So I think our kids really appreciate that teachers are learners as well.
Moving to our next strategy, which is playlists. So a playlist would be your student activities that are designed to be completed independently without live teacher instruction. And these can include MustDos as well as choices for students to complete. So they're a little bit different from your virtual stations because they don't include that live teacher piece or group work that would be happening live. And these could be differentiated. So you might have playlists for different levels and different needs of students in your class. So some examples of things that would be must-dos, those could be your pre-assessments or quick checks, introduction of new content. So what you're doing live with your kids in Zoom, you could actually pre-record that instead and have that on a playlist for your students to do at their own pace so that they can pause and rewatch and process content at their own speed. That could include performance assessments, any kind of creation task, reteaching activities. So again, being able to differentiate to meet your students' needs, things like Nearpod, and then any kind of reflection activity. Some choice examples in a playlist might be your independent practice pieces, read and response, any kind of review activities, spiral review, and then creation. So responding to lesson content or videos that you've created or something maybe that you've done in a group, they could be responding to that and creating something. So some examples might be a slides presentation or creating a video in WeVideo. We have a couple of examples of templates and ideas for you. So here's an example where at the top, so you would complete these and have these ready to go for the whole week. So you would prepare everything and then push this out to your students in Google Classroom, and they would have everything that they need to work through for the week. And at the top, they can see the must-dos that need to be done each day, and then down below, working through those choices. This is another example, just another setup, and these might be similar to things that you're already doing. You probably have done hyperdocs or self-paced student activities, so just another way to set that up would be this kind of playlist. So how do we actually apply that and do that in our classrooms? You can create a playlist in Google Docs or Slides, and then you would share that with your students as view only because they need to access the links in the content, but they don't need to edit it or have their own copy. Make sure, just like with virtual stations, we want to plan for how our students are going to be accountable for their independent work. So are they going to be turning in a product? Will they be completing something on Flipgrid or a kind of reflection? Maybe there's a Google form that they're going to be submitting, just some kind of piece where they're accountable for the work that they've been doing in that time. And then consider which district resources you might want to use for those independent student activities. So a self-paced Nearpod would fit in here really well. And then how are you going to organize that content in Google Classroom? How will your students be submitting work? Will they be submitting it all in one place? Will you break those out? Think about the naming conventions you might want to use to keep assignments straight for you and for your students. Any kind of labels or topics that you're going to use within Google Classroom to organize that content.
Okay, so how can we utilize Nearpod, one of our district resources, when we're in this co-seating environment? So Camille has made a wonderful little video for us about using Nearpod. So we're going to play that real quick.
Setting up your teacher screen is important when running a live Nearpod with your class. Notice in the dual screen, the red box shows you the teacher view of the Nearpod in your web browser, and the green box is your Zoom open. The blue circle indicates the chat that you can have up as a back channel for your students. Now here are the differences between what the students view and what the teacher will view. For example, here's a matching problem where the students can choose the correct answer. And on the teacher end, you will see how many matches each student got correct. On the Draw It function, you will be able to see in real time the drawings or annotations that the students are making. If you have a screen that a student is doing a good job and you want to share with the rest of the class, click the red share button. The name of that student will be removed and their annotation or drawing will be shown to the entire class. On a fill in the blanks, the kids can drag the correct answer and you will see how many they got correct on your screen. And finally, on a multiple choice, once a student selects an answer, you will see a blue dot where they have made their choice. At the end of a Nearpod, you can run a report to get your data that you need, whether that would be formative data or something that you want to collect for grades. Go to the Nearpod, select the 3 dots, choose Reports, and this is what you'll see.
Teachers also have the option to do student pace. So when they go to launch their Nearpod, they'll see the live participation or student pace. That means that the students can do it on their own without the teacher being there leading them through the activity. This is great for a playlist. And you can also use it to for kids that are absent or kids that need tutoring or reteach. That can be another way to get them the instruction that they missed out live with the teacher. If you are someone who is familiar with Edpuzzle or using Edpuzzle, Nearpod now has those same features built into it where you can insert a video and then stop and ask questions along the way. So we have some resources here for y'all. We will be available for office hours for any questions that you might have answered or that you might need answered. We have linked the templates here. And student engagement is nothing new. I know that's what we are all doing with our students every day, is trying to keep them engaged and actively learning. We're just trying to give you strategies and tools in your toolbox to help support you in this new co-seating adventure that we're all about to start.